Download this code from codegive.com, link in the description below. OK, let's dive deep into the topic of React component size and how to tell if your components are becoming too large, along with strategies to refactor them. This is a critical skill for maintaining a scalable and maintainable React application. The problem: monolithic React components. A monolithic component is a single React component that contains a significant amount of logic, rendering, and state management. These components are often characterized by excessive lines of code. While there's no hard and fast rule, components exceeding several hundred lines of code are often candidates for refactoring. Multiple responsibilities. The component tries to do too many things, handling data fetching, complex calculations, rendering different views, and managing various user interactions. Tight coupling. The component's parts are closely intertwined, making it difficult to isolate and test individual pieces of functionality. Reduced reusability. The component is so specific to its current context that it's hard to reuse it in other parts of the application. Difficult to understand. The sheer complexity of the component makes it hard for developers to grasp its overall purpose and how its different parts work together. Performance issues. Re-rendering large, complex components can negatively impact the application's performance, especially if they contain computationally intensive operations. Why are large components a problem? Maintainability. Debugging, modifying, and extending large components becomes extremely challenging. Changes in one part of the component can have unintended consequences in other parts. Testability. Writing effective unit tests for monolithic components is difficult because you need to mock and simulate a large portion of the component's state and behavior. Reusability. Large components are typically tightly coupled to the specific context in which they are used, making it difficult to reuse them in other parts of the application. Readability. Long and complex code makes it hard to understand the component's purpose and the relationships between its different parts. Team collaboration. Multiple developers working on the same large component can lead to merge conflicts and increase development time. Performance. Large components can lead to performance issues due to unnecessary re-renders and increased complexity in the rendering process. Identifying oversized components. Here are some warning signs that your React components might be getting too big. 1. The scroll of shame. You find yourself scrolling excessively to navigate the component's code. This is a clear indicator of excessive length and complexity. 2. The if/else maze. Your component contains a deeply nested chain of if/else statements or switch statements that control the rendering or behavior. This indicates that the component is trying to handle too many different scenarios. 3. The giant state object. Your component's state object contains a large number of properties, many of which are only used in specific parts of the component. This suggests that the component's responsibilities could be split into smaller, more focused components. 4. The prop drilling problem. You find yourself passing props through multiple layers of components just to reach a specific component that needs the data. This indicates that the component hierarchy might need to be restructured. 5. The mystery render. You're unsure why the component is re-rendering, even when the props or state haven't changed. This can be a sign that the component's rendering logic is too complex. 6. Complexity of logic. A component that handles a lot of logic such as data transformation, complex calculation, or API calls is a sign that the component is too big. Refactoring strategies, breaking down monolithic components. Here are several effective strategies for refactoring large React components into smaller, more manageable ones. 1. Extract presentational components. Asterisk concept asterisk identify the parts of your component that are primarily responsible for rendering the UI. Extract these parts into separate presentational components. Presentational components, also known as dumb components or stateless functional components, focus solely on displaying data and do not contain any business logic or state management. Asterisk benefit asterisk separates the rendering logic from the business logic, making the component easier to read, test, and reuse. In this example, user profile display is a purely presentational component. It receives the user data and event handlers as props and renders the UI accordingly. The user profile component now focuses solely on managing the state and passing the necessary data to user profile display. To extract logic into custom hooks asterisk. Asterisk concept asterisk if your component contains complex logic, such as data fetching, state management, or calculations, extract that logic into custom React hooks. Custom hooks allow you to reuse stateful logic across multiple components. Asterisk benefit asterisk reduces the complexity of the component, promotes code reuse, and makes the logic easier to test. In this example, the data fetching logic is extracted into a custom hook called useFetch. The productID list component now simply uses this hook to fetch the product data and render the UI. 3. Compose smaller components asterisk. Asterisk concept asterisk identify distinct sections or features within the large component and extract them into separate, self-contained components. These smaller components can then be composed together to create the overall UI. Asterisk benefit asterisk reduces the complexity of the parent component, promotes code reuse, and makes it easier to reason about the individual parts of the UI. In this example, the order details component is broken down into several smaller components: order ID, customer name, order date, order items, shipping address, and total amount. Each of these components is responsible for rendering a specific part of the order details. The order details component then composes these smaller components to create the overall UI. 4. Use render props or function as child components asterisk. Asterisk concept asterisk if your component contains rendering logic that depends on some internal state or data, consider using render props or function as child components to allow the parent component to control the rendering. This is particularly useful when you want to share rendering logic between multiple components. Asterisk benefit asterisk reduces the complexity of the component, promotes code reuse, and allows for greater flexibility in the rendering process. In this example, the data fetcher component fetches data from a URL. Instead of rendering the data itself, it uses a render prop, a function, to allow the parent component to control how the data is rendered. This gives the parent component more flexibility in how it displays the data. Function as child components example asterisk. This example is very similar to the render props example, but instead of using a render prop, it uses the children prop. The children prop is a function that receives the fetched data as an argument and returns the UI to be rendered. 5. Use context API or Redux, or Zustand, Jotai, etc., for state management asterisk. Asterisk concept asterisk if your component manages a lot of complex state that needs to be shared across multiple components, consider using the React Context API or a state management library like Redux to manage the state in a more centralized and organized way. Asterisk benefit asterisk reduces the complexity of the component, avoids prop drilling, and makes it easier to manage the application state. In this example, the theme state is moved to a theme context. The header, content, and footer components can now access the theme state directly from the context, without having to receive it as a prop. This avoids prop drilling and makes the code cleaner. 6. Leverage higher order components, HOCs, use with caution. Concept hooks are functions that take a component as an argument and return a new, enhanced component. They are a way to reuse component logic. Benefit can be useful for adding common functionality, example authentication, data fetching, to multiple components. However, overuse of hooks can make component composition more complex and harder to reason about. Consider alternatives like hooks first. Example, use with caution. General best practices single responsibility principle each component should have a clear and focused purpose. Keep components small aim for components that are easy to understand and maintain. Dry, don't repeat yourself, extract common logic and UI patterns into reusable components or hooks. Test your components write unit tests to ensure that your components are working correctly. Refactor regularly as your application grows, revisit your components and refactor them as needed. Naming convention use clear and descriptive names for your components, props, and functions. This makes the code easier to understand. Code reviews have other developers review your code to identify potential issues and areas for improvement. Important considerations premature optimization don't start refactoring components before you have a clear understanding of the problem and a well-defined plan. Abstraction cost creating too many small components can sometimes increase the complexity of the application, so strike a balance between component size and overall complexity. Component nesting be mindful of component nesting levels, as deep nesting can negatively impact performance. Performance profiling use the React profiler to identify performance bottlenecks in your application and focus your refactoring efforts on the areas that will have the greatest impact. By following these guidelines and strategies, you can keep your React components small, maintainable, and reusable, leading to a more scalable and enjoyable development experience. Remember that refactoring is an iterative process, so don't be afraid to experiment and adjust your approach as needed. Good luck.